Welcome to the Reindl Report.
Hey, here's a hot take for you. Steph Curry, most overrated basketball player I've ever seen.
A podcast out of San Diego, California that rewrites the definition of mediocrity.
Yeah, and I don't trust anyone that calls a hot dog a sandwich. Are you crazy?
Are you stupid or something?
And I'll tell you another thing. You know what? I think pineapples do belong on pizza.
Mama says stupid is as stupid does.
I think watching pitchers try to hit in baseball is one of the worst things in all of sports.
Oh my God, Paul, you make me so mad sometimes.
And I don't want to hear any of this 6-0 in the finals. LeBron James will retire as the GOAT.
Shut the up! Now, here's your host, Paul Reindl.
Oh, yeah. Still getting used to that new open. Some hot takes there for you. Tell you what, there's going to be some hot takes on this podcast, too. We're getting back into it. Getting back into sports. What's going on, everybody? Paul Reindl here, host of the Reindl Report, episode 46 of this podcast. This is a sports podcast based out of San Diego. Not going to be a whole lot of San Diego talk on this podcast, however. We're going to be focusing on what's going on nationally, and there's a lot to get to. So my last podcast, it's still online. It's still on iTunes. We took a break from sports. We had Billy Gleason, comedian. He works for Stephen Colbert in New York City. Highly recommend checking it out. It's a little bit different. We're throwing a little bit different stuff at you, and we're just laughing. We're having a good time. We're talking about the history of stand-up comedy and how a guy kind of, cuts his teeth and makes it into that really tough, demanding profession. And it was really great. But we're back. We're getting into sports here. This is kind of the dead period of sports, typically, at least. This is, July. You're kind of waiting for training camp. Between the NBA Finals and training camp, there's not a whole lot going on. There's the All-Star Game. Okay, well, I've actually got some thoughts on the MLB All-Star Game. I'm going to get to that. But this year in particular, the sports gods have blessed us because there is so much to talk about these days. This is the time when sports hosts on radio and television, they go on their vacations now because they got the NFL season coming up, and they're like, well, there's nothing to talk about. But I got to get into this Conor McGregor and Floyd Mayweather world tour for the super fight coming up on August 26th. Definitely going to get to that. The NBA, I talked about it a couple podcasts ago, but a lot has changed. Summer League's going on. NBA contracts are through the roof. And the NBA offseason, it's proving to be more entertaining than the regular season. The playoffs are great, but the NBA offseason, it's always good. There's always blockbuster moves and big signings and where is this guy going to go? Is this guy leaving? And stuff like that. But it has just been amplified this year, and so definitely got some thoughts on that. That's what we're going to hit on this podcast. I'm going to start in the MLB, but first, going to bring on a old friend. He's a very good friend of this podcast. He's been around really since the beginning of it, doing traffic updates when we were at San Diego State. You know him as Downtown Tom. Tommy, what's going on, my man?
Hey, he's back and better than ever.
Back and better than ever. So you have moved. You're in LA. What's the traffic like up there now?
It's not too bad. I actually have avoided buying a car just for that reason, but I do drive one every once in a while, and it doesn't seem as bad as advertised. So don't buy the hype, basically. But I do use the train here quite often, and that's pretty reliable. So I'm a millennial. What can you say?
Hey, nothing, no arguments here. San Diego is actually not the best for traffic, but you know what? It's no LA. Every time I'm up there, I'm reminded, San Diego traffic's not that bad. The 805, not that bad.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the only option you got because that trolley takes you from, nowhere to nowhere.
Exactly. Basically. I mean, unless you're going from San Diego State to Old Town. that's the trolley line.
And if you have about 2 hours to spare.
Yeah, oh God, don't get me started. Tom, we're just going to dive right into it. I know you didn't watch a whole lot of the Home Run Derby or if any of the All-Star Game or anything like that, but I do got some thoughts, and I'll bring you in on it. First, I want to start with the Home Run Derby. Now, new format. It went into effect 2 years ago where they added a clock. It's a bracket form. And I remember watching 2 years ago, I can't remember where the All-Star game was, but I remember Todd Frazier won it. And it was one of those things where it came down to the wire. I mean, he had like 10 seconds left to hit 2 home runs. And I'm sitting there, I'm watching the home run derby, and I'm on the edge of my seat. I'm like freaking out when he won it, and it was great. And then last year in San Diego, Giancarlo Stanton putting on an insane show. I mean, I was not there, but it was one of the craziest things I've seen on a baseball field, the way this guy can hit home runs. And I was able to go to a Marlins game separate from the All-Star festivities, and just being there and watching him take batting practice, it is a spectacle. So I'm really a big fan of this home run derby. Love the new format. Did you get to watch any of it? Did you see Aaron Judge do his thing?
I have not actually seen any of that, except for I follow the Twins on Instagram, and I did see Miguel Sano put up I think he won his first round, so that's about as far as I got into the home run derby.
Yeah, well, like I said, I'm a big fan of the new format. I think it can be even better, though, and here's what I would like to see MLB do. Because, look, the MLB, they've got a bit of an image problem. They have the luxury of, similar to the NBA, of their guys are able to be recognizable. Football players, they got the helmets on. You don't know what a lot of these guys look like, besides the fact that they're 350 pounds. You might go, I bet that guy plays for the NFL. But unless they're a superstar, you don't know what a lot of these guys look like. Baseball, they have the ability to create superstars, and they have guys like Mike Trout and Bryce Harper, and now we got Aaron Judge coming up, but there's still a bit of an identity problem. So MLB, there's this conversation that's been going on for a few years. The MLB, what do they got to do to be cool again? You go back, and I'm gonna toot the Seattle horn here growing up in the Northwest, but guys like Ken Griffey Jr., when they were making video games, the backwards hat, baseball was cool when you're watching Ken Griffey Jr., and they don't really have that going on right now. So I credit the MLB for changing things up, because the home run derby was probably one of the worst all-star festivities in all of sports prior to this. It used to be fun, and then they kind of just went away. Granted, the steroids went away, so I'm sure that had something to do with it. Here's what I want to see the MLB do, and tell me if you think this would be fun. First, I'd like to see a pitching machine. I'm sick of these guys having their brother or their pitching coach come out there, and they're missing the strike zone, because now there's a time limit. You used to get 10 outs. Now there's a time limit. So you need every pitch to be right down the pipe. And, I'm watching the home run derby last year at Petco Park. It was cool. Will Myers, San Diego's own, he had his brother out there, and his brother hit him with a pitch. And it's a nice gesture to have your brother out there. I get that, and we're just having fun. But I would like to see a pitching machine just out there. It's pumping strikes right down the middle. You know where it's going to be. Let's boost the home run totals even more, because that's what we're all here to see. It's the home run derby. And the other thing I want to see, I want these guys to start using aluminum bats. I want to see Giancarlo Stanton and Aaron Judge next year hitting with aluminum bats. I want 600-foot home runs. What do you think of that, Tom?
I think that is a safety concern for the MLB, first of all. So I do not think they'll ever do that. If they were to do that in maybe an empty stadium, sure. I like the pitching machine idea, but while you were speaking, I just came up with an idea of my own. How about they do rounds where the first round starts off as fastballs, and all they get is fastballs. The second round, the winner of the previous round with more home runs gets to choose which pitch it's going to be next, but it can't be fastballs. And all they get that entire round is that single pitch. So what if the guy's like, I hit sliders really well, we're going to do sliders this round, and the person he's going against has got to hit sliders the entire round. And then once you get down to the end, you got like knuckleballs is the last one, and they bring down a specialist for each of those pitches.
That would be interesting. I don't know. It'll up the difficulty for sure. It might diminish the home run totals. So we'll see. As far as the safety issues go with the aluminum bats, funny thing, actually, I'm watching the home run derby on Monday, and I tweeted out, I go, man, how has none of these little kids, there's all these kids running around the field. I'm like, how have we gone years without seeing a kid just get smoked by some line drive?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, it's bound to happen. And I'm not hoping for it to happen, but I just thought it was interesting. I'm like, why have we never seen that? And literally within 2 minutes, I think it was Moustakas was up to bat, and just this girl takes like a line drive right to the neck. I mean, You want to talk about safety? They might be changing that up pretty soon.
Yeah, did they pan the camera away real quick and try to hide it or what? Yeah,
exactly. Moving on. What happened here? Nothing to see here, folks. So
yeah, no, totally. I mean, I think the only other alternative, if you want to see more home runs, everybody should take like a testosterone booster the night before and just let it loose.
Sure. They already do juice the balls up, but whatever you got to do, wind them tighter, juice them up a little bit more. It's the home run derby.
Now, is that confirmed or is that still in conspiracy stage?
I have heard it so often from so many different people that I believe they do juice the home run derby balls.
Well, that's the home run derbies, but weren't they saying that about regular baseball too?
Oh, yeah. I don't believe that in the regular season. I don't see it.
Okay, and can you also inform an ignorant outside fan like myself what exactly goes into juicing a baseball? Like, what does that even entail?
Primarily, it's the yarn around the cork. You wind it tighter, and it makes it a little more aerodynamic, I think is how it works.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, I think every male has unraveled at least one baseball in his childhood, so I know exactly what you're talking about. That makes sense.
Right, pulling a little sandlot there.
Yeah.
Real quick, I'm going to move on to the All-Star Game now. Tuesday. This is the first year that the All-Star Game no longer means anything, and I remember, 13, 14 years ago when they moved. They had the tie in Milwaukee, and that kind of sparked them deciding to move the All-Star Game to have meaning, and it'll determine home field advantage. And I remember thinking, okay, that's kind of cool. Why not? Make it worth watching. Make it worth playing. And after about the third inning of the following year, I go, that's a terrible idea. I don't know why anybody even thought it was a good idea, including myself. Horrible idea, because that's why now every team had to have one representative. But, man, I just had a problem with an all-star game, an exhibition game, essentially, determining home field advantage in the World Series, because maybe you make a run in the second half and you only had one guy and he pinch ran and that was his contribution to the game. And all of a sudden your team loses and you're not going to get home field advantage if you had the better record than your opponent. It makes no sense to me. So they canceled that. They got that out of there. But that goes back to this image problem that the MLB has. They now have to spice up the All-Star Game, because the MLB All-Star Game, people already across America think baseball is boring. Now we have an All-Star Game. It ended this week 2-1. Extra inning home run from Robinson Cano, kind of exciting, okay, but it was a pitcher's duel. It was 2-1, and I just, who signs up for that? It had nothing. It was like the Pro Bowl. Nobody cares about the Pro Bowl. Nobody cares about the All-Star Game. In the NBA All-Star Game, at least you're going there. You know what you're getting. You're only there. You're not going to see defense. You're only there to see guys lobbing it up. You're there to see LeBron throw it off the shot clock to himself and throw it down. So you know what you're getting with the NBA. But the MLB, I credit them a ton for the work that they did on Tuesday in the All-Star Game, because the broadcast really, they spiced things up a little bit. They had Alex Rodriguez in between innings while the pitcher's throwing warm-up pitches. He's going from second base to shortstop to third base, talking to Arenado and Correa and these guys, and he's just interviewing them on the field. And they're like, all right, time to go. A-Rod, get off the field. But the best part, and I've actually got a little bit of sound here from it. I'll let you listen to this, Tom, because I know you weren't watching the game. Bryce Harper, in the top of the fourth inning. First of all, probably the guy that the MLB is like putting all their eggs in this basket for this guy to be the face of the sport, for this guy to be the superstar that the sport needs. He's out there in the top of the fourth inning playing right field, and he's got a microphone pinned to his jersey. He's got headphones in his ears, and he is doing an on-field interview with Joe Buck during the game. Can you even believe that?
Oh, sorry. I thought you were going right into the clip. No, I mean, I think that's a great idea. Very innovative on their part. I'm kind of interested to hear what he had to say, actually.
All right, so I didn't take the whole top half of the fourth inning, but I pulled about 30 seconds, and it's just Bryce Harper having some fun and thinking, man, this is kind of cool. Here it is.
I don't know. I mean, I feel like I'm commentating like NFL Network with you right now.
1 on, 2 out.
Speaking of, how do you think Dak's going to be this year?
I think it'll be. I have not met a more impressive young player coming into the NFL in the time I have covered.
Oh, man, he's fun to watch. I mean, watching him on Sundays and Mondays, Thursdays, that guy, him and Zeke, unbelievable. It's a lot of fun.
It is.
And the 1-0 pitch. So, what do you think of Dak Prescott? I mean, I thought it was great. And I don't know what the future of that's going to look like for the sport. They would never do that during a playoff game or during a World Series game. I'd kind of be down with seeing that on like maybe Sunday Night Baseball, the game of the week or something like that during the regular season. If the player's fine with it, if the coach is fine with it, and ownership and all that, maybe it's got to go through the Players Association. I would love to see more of that because I thought that was outstanding.
Yeah, when they actually started doing that with the managers, I don't know how long ago, 10, 15 years ago, in between innings or even during the innings, or even if it was the bench coach, I always liked the insights during the game. And they're so much more calm and comfortable, those interviews are, than those sideline report ones the NBA tries to force those coaches to do, because obviously baseball's got a little bit more downtime, and they're actually able to take a step away and talk for about 30 seconds to a minute about it. And they'll have the game up, and the pitch will go through, the coach will watch, and then all of a sudden they'll resume the interview. And I think that's a great way to get involved with the players during a game. But actually doing it on the field, I'm not sure they'll be able to do that in a regular season game like you say, but in the All-Star game, that's a great point of view. Now, leave it to Joe Buck to actually take his questions seriously and jump up on his soapbox. In all my years of interviewing, just stop it, Joe. Just stop.
You know what? I got to go. I'm going to go off script here. I got to go on a little. Just hang with me here. Joe Buck, he gets so much crap from everybody. You just dished him some crap, and maybe that was warranted. I'll give you that. But why do all these people hate commentators so much? I've never been able to wrap my head around people that they go on Twitter, and I mean, Carl Ravitch, for example, replaces Chris Berman on Monday for the home run derby. No more back, gone! No more Chris Berman. We knew that ahead of time. His role at ESPN has pretty much been taken away. But I just don't understand when I see all these people talking crap about Joe Buck. I mean, look, the guy, you don't get the Masters and the Super Bowl and the World Series by sucking. So I've never understood what makes a good or a bad commentator. It's like they're broadcasting. They're broadcasting the game. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, I think Jim Nance does the Masters. Correct me if I'm wrong.
When it's on CBS?
I thought it was always on CBS. Either way.
Maybe it's U.S. Open and stuff like that. Whenever Fox gets
you're
right.
Major. It's U.S. Open. But for me, I like announcers that are complementary to what I'm watching on the TV. And there's certain guys that I will tolerate when they are kind of adding to the show with their own flair. But Joe Buck's additions for me are not something I care to hear ever. Like, he's just the stories and just his takes and the comments he likes to make towards the game. It's like, it's not complimentary. It's just kind of unnecessary, and it's obnoxious to me. I don't have the same kind of extreme hate that I've seen a lot of people have for him in the past, but, I mean, just like that situation. It's like, Joe, I just don't care for your opinion. I don't care. But, like there's a Gus Johnson. I love Gus Johnson. Or all the Mexican commentators on Univision with soccer that do the goal for 45 seconds. Down with that. But that's also part of, March Madness is such an exciting event that Gus Johnson's warranted of doing those kind of crazy outtakes. But I don't know what it is about Joe Buck. He just kind of bugs me.
Sure. I mean, not everybody can be Kevin Harlan, Kevin Calabro, these guys that are pretty much unanimously loved. But I just see so much hate for, it's like, oh my God, Troy Aikman's doing our game on Sunday. It's like, who cares? Like, is that really going to persuade you to not watch the game? No. But
well, let's take a step back and think about the guys who have been really rejected over the years. Like, you remember Dennis Miller's awful tenure on Monday Night Football. He was going way too far off script and trying to make it about him. And it's like, well, first of all, Dennis, you're not funny. You haven't been funny in about 20 years. But second of all, like, you're not speaking to the right audience with this kind of humor. Like, we're here to watch the Monday Night Football game, not hear your shitty stand-up. Like, that's all there is to it. And it goes. Remember when Mike Golick was trying out to be a Monday Night announcer? And I think that guy's deplorable. I can't stand listening to him on ESPN. I'm so happy to hear Mike and Mike's breaking up. It's just they're not interesting. They're not funny, and they're not allowing me to sit there and watch the game. Reggie Miller's another one. Good God! I mean, it almost made me give up basketball.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a few where I get the warranted hate. I mean, Phil Simms, for example, just on a Sunday in the NFL season, just search the hashtag, things Phil Simms said or something like that, and it'll blow your mind.
Wait, didn't Phil Simms lose it to Tony Romo?
Right, he won't be around anymore. He will still be doing games. He won't be on the number one team.
Well, I think the network proved what you just said was correct because obviously Tony Romo's never called a game in his life, and he's already taken that seat. So,
right.
Anyway, back to what you were saying.
Well, I want to transition here. We're talking with Downtown Tom, a longtime friend of the Rinder Report. Have you been following Conor McGregor and Floyd Mayweather? They started a 4-city press conference world tour this week. They've been in L.A., they've been in New York by the time this podcast is being recorded. Toronto by the time this podcast is being recorded. They're on their way to New York, and then they still have London. And then that's pretty much it. They're going to go back and train, and then we'll have the week of the fight. We'll have the weigh-in and all of that. Have you been following any of the insanity that has been going on?
Oh, yeah. I'm sucked in already. I told myself I wasn't going to fall for this publicity stunt that was this match, and I'm falling for it already. I've caught myself sitting there on YouTube and Instagram and Twitter, like watching the videos nonstop. I just can't get enough of these two. And Conor McGregor is just such a showman. He's so hilarious. And that suit, my God, that suit.
Yeah, so if you're not sure what Tom is talking about by now, he's on the first press conference. He's talking about, he's just doing what Conor McGregor does. He's just saying, "Look at this suit. This is an outstanding suit, a new Conor McGregor line." And I'm not going to do his accent because I can't do it, but he goes, "And if you zoom in on the pinstripes, it says F you." And we're thinking, oh, that's funny. And later on, we see on Twitter, somebody zooms in on his suit, and it says that on the pinstripes. It's just Conor McGregor, and I've thought this now for a little while, now that I've been starting to try to at least follow the MMA a little bit more in the UFC, he is the most entertaining guy in sports.
Well, he's certainly up there, that's for damn sure. But I definitely think that had the crowd been able to see those pinstripes up close when he made that joke, the roar of the crowd would probably have still been going. I mean, I think it was kind of like, what is he talking about? And then he said something else, and they went nuts for that. But then when you zoom in on that and see that, it's like, who has the gall to try that? Don't call me out for using a Stephen A word, but he's just hilarious. And now you got all these people commenting on the things he's saying to Mayweather. Are they racist? Because if he told him to stand up and dance for him, boy, and all this stuff. It's like, no, I think he's just insane. He's just nuts. And he just spews all the time. But he's a great showman, and I mean, obviously this is what it takes to draw big pay-per-views in boxing, and he's the perfect counterpart to Mayweather. It's actually it's going to get me hooked in. I certainly won't pay the $89.95, but I'll be looking forward to streaming it online.
Yeah, there you go. Real quick, you're talking about Conor and just his outlandish act and how he carries himself on camera and everything. It reminded me back in, I want to say it was November. We had on the podcast Alex Padilla works with me at the Mighty 1090, and he's my MMA expert. This guy knows everything about the UFC and about boxing and just the fighting world. And it was really good. It was leading up to, I think, a big Ronda Rousey fight. I think it was her last fight that we had him on. And I'm definitely going to have Alex on the podcast sometime between now and August 26th. But he was telling me he's met Conor McGregor a couple of times on Radio Row when all the superstars just go from radio booth to radio booth and they're doing all their hits. And he's met Conor, and he goes, Conor is the coolest guy you'd ever meet. I mean, he's super nice. He's well-mannered. He's awesome. And then it's just when the lights come on, he knows how to switch it into fifth gear and turn back into, Conor Notorious McGregor. I think that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I watched the behind-the-scenes video that Dana White put up for, around the L.A. press conference, and he walks up there right before they're about to start, and he goes, well, did you plan anything for this? You got a speech? My Conor voice is even worse than yours, and Dana was like, oh, yeah, I got something written out. He's like, shit, I'm going to wing it. I'm just going to wing it, and he gets up there and does his thing. He comes back, he's like, totally should have planned something there.
Yeah, and really, I mean, Conor McGregor, if you look into his story, there's going to be documentaries on the guy after he's retired and who knows what his career will look like when it's all said and done. But his background, man, he was not handed anything. I mean, growing up in Ireland, excuse me. I mean, he was like living off the government, on like food stamps or whatever the equivalent is in Ireland. His girlfriend was supporting him financially, and he was just out there fighting in what I can only assume is like some crappy ring in a bar, in a pub in Ireland, and just trying to make it. And now the guy's, making $100 million for a fight. It's pretty awesome. I got nothing but respect for Conor McGregor. But I want to get back to the press conference from this week. Not only was Conor just absolutely making me, I'm almost in tears. I'm laughing so hard at this act and the things that he's saying right to Floyd's face and anybody else that's on stage getting in his way. But I thought Floyd Mayweather was actually really good. Floyd Mayweather, he kind of went back to Pretty Boy Floyd instead of Money Mayweather that we've seen over the last few years, where he's a little more, I don't know, calm might not be the right word, a little more reserved, just out there for the money, just doing his thing, promoting his brand. Back in his day, though, Pretty Boy Floyd, he was kind of the modern-day Conor McGregor. And so I think Floyd has definitely gone back to that, and I loved watching them go toe-to-toe. Floyd, you got to give him credit. He didn't back down from Conor. He was not intimidated at all, and he dished it right back.
I think part of that is the fact that he hasn't had an opponent that's brought it like Conor, at least verbally, in quite some time. I mean, the biggest name I can remember him fighting of late, I won't even count Pacquiao, but Pacquiao is very quiet and reserved and pretty respectful most of the time, too, I feel like. But, Canelo Alvarez, when he fought him, he was like 20 years old and wet behind the ears, had nothing to say. But Conor's bringing the best out of him. I think this is just the perfect storm of, Muhammad Ali disciples in terms of showmanship. And, how do you think the fight's going to go?
Let's get to that in a minute. I definitely have some thoughts on the fight. What I want to do, because each press conference, there's been 2 of 4 so far. They're about 20 minutes long, and damn it, I considered just playing all 40 minutes and just making that the podcast because it was that entertaining. What I did, though, I took I got like 3 minutes worth of the best of the first 2 days of these press conferences. I'm just going to play it because if you have not heard this, if you're listening to the podcast and you have not heard these press conferences, you have been missing out, and I'm going to help you out here a little bit. So, Tom, stay on the line. Stay with me. We're going to play these 3 minutes, and we'll come back, and we'll see how it sounds.
He's in a tracksuit. He can't even afford a suit anymore. The Roses are 2012 outside. He is There's no other way about it. His little legs, his little core, his little head. I'm going to knock him out inside 4 rounds, mark my words. As far as the fight, he will be unconscious inside 4 rounds. The movement, the power, the ferociousness, he's not experienced this. He's fought people who have shied away from him. I don't fear him. This isn't a true fight. If this was a true fight, it wouldn't even take 1 round.
You light him up and I knock him down like bowling pins. And August 26th, I'm going to knock this out too.
Yeah, right. I haven't knocked nobody out in about 20 years. Dance for me, boy. Dance for me. Dance for me, boy. Dance for me, son. Dance for me.
Hey, give me that backpack. Give me that backpack. Let me show you what a $100 million fighter look like. Still got $100 million and they ain't never touched this.
That's to the tax man.
You right. I'm the IRS, and I'm gonna tax your.
I'm not gonna do.
What the is he wearing? He looks like a little breakdancer or something. A little 12-year-old breakdancer, bitch. What the He's 40. You're 40 years of age. Dress your age. Carrying a school bag on stage. What are you doing with a school bag on stage? You can't even read. 40 years old carrying a school bag. The man doesn't even read.
One thing we do know, the fans can't fight for you.
Shut your mouth.
If you believe in yourself, like you say you believe in yourself, bitch your whole fight check, you bitch.
No problem. Send the contract, kid. It's done. When I count to 3, I want this entire arena to scream, the Mayweathers. 1, 2, 3, the Mayweathers. stripper bitches on his payroll. Shout out to all the stripper bitches on his payroll. At least Rob Kardashian only had one. He has 50.
I mean, we got a Rob Kardashian reference in this. It's just that press conference had everything to it. Look, I watched the entire press conference on day one, and then I went home after work, and I watched it again. I couldn't get enough of it. I'm going to probably do the same the rest of the week. How great was that, Tom?
I think he is just, he's a comedian out there, but I can only think the way he's going to elevate the next press conference. I imagine there's going to be props. He's going to have other stuff. You got to have people behind the scenes that are sitting there digging up dirt on one another. And I can only imagine what they're going to do next. It's going to be so great.
Well, that's the thing. They definitely have to, they got to keep momentum going. I thought the second press conference was much better than the first, and I'm expecting the third to be better than the second, and I'm definitely expecting, I don't know about punches being thrown, but I'm expecting some people to be shoving each other. Maybe the crews get into it. I don't know. But on day 4, that's when all hell breaks loose, because that's going to be one of their final pitches to anybody that's on the fence about buying this fight. They're gonna hype it up as much as they can. I agree. I don't know if any of this is actually scripted or choreographed or anything like that. I think these are just two insane entertainers doing their thing. But they definitely are going to have to, they don't have to, but I'm expecting them to ramp it up just a little bit each and every time they're toe-to-toe. They're gonna take it up a notch, and then they're going to take it up another notch. And I can't get enough of this.
Yeah, I also personally love the side fighting going on between Floyd Sr. and Conor McGregor. It's just been so great to watch that, too.
Oh, yeah, it's just great. That's what a lot of people tuned out after the press conference was done, but then they go and have a Q&A for like another 45 minutes after that with the reporters and the guys that are there covering for the sport. And you talked about Floyd Mayweather Sr. interrupting him, and he's getting served by McGregor, and it's just, I couldn't get enough of it. It's so good. Let's get to the fight, though. Actually, real quick, before I get to the fight, one thing that I did notice, and I wrote it down, I wanted to make a note of it. I feel like, in general, and maybe you have watched more fighting than I have, more boxing or MMA, there's a lot of, it appears that there's a lot of national pride. Would I be wrong in saying that?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's very big deal to every country that has a fighter that's kind of like their guy. And obviously the smaller countries in I don't know if Ireland's considered lower than first world, but I believe it is. Regardless, they're insane towards. I remember Roberto Duran with, I believe, Panama. You hear me try to roll my R there, but it was a terrible attempt. He had the whole country behind him, and it's just great to watch in boxing. They do that with soccer. Obviously, it's a big deal there, too. But, yeah, definitely Ireland's crazy about McGregor.
Right. It feels like there's a lot of patriotism behind these sports, people back in their country. And you mentioned Ireland. I don't know. I've never been to Europe. I don't know exactly how far the distance is between Ireland and London. I know it's not that far. I'm expecting that fourth and final London press conference to be insane based on the crowd and the proximity to Ireland. It's going to be a very pro-McGregor crowd. However, so far both press conferences have been pro-McGregor, and that's what made me start thinking about, wait, isn't there like usually a national pride and a patriotism kind of thing? Because everybody hates Floyd Mayweather. He's getting booed. They had 20,000 people at the Staples Center for the first press conference, and he was getting booed. It sounded like when he was doing his hard work does what or whatever. He had like 10 people in the crowd on his side, and I just think a lot of people are pulling for Conor, and I don't know. I think that's got to do with Conor being Conor, but Floyd Mayweather, not the most likable athlete.
Yeah, they're pulling for the alternative to Floyd, essentially, and it just happens to be Conor in this fight. But, I think he's made he's carved out his legacy as the villain. And, I think it's kind of the old adage that Howard Stern always had, like people that hate him watch it all the time just to see what he's going to do next. And Floyd's kind of fit that bill his whole career, and I think that's exactly what he's doing here, and he's going to continue that role. And unfortunately, I couldn't imagine an opponent that he has that people would be pulling for him for.
Sure.
The whole money team, and he walks around with like 6 giant bodyguards everywhere he goes. I actually saw him in Vegas this past weekend, and he had like 3 of the biggest dudes I've ever seen in my life just standing behind him, and all he was doing was sitting there having a conversation with Isaiah Thomas. I was like, this is a little overkill, right? Like, nobody's actually coming for you, you idiot.
Right. Yeah, nobody's picking a fight with a 49-0 professional boxer just on the street or anything like that. But no, I mean, look, Floyd definitely has the history. If you know anything about Floyd, you know why he's not very well liked. I mean, the guy beats women. Let's just call it what it is. But if you didn't know that, if you knew nothing about Floyd Mayweather, I just don't understand how you could watch these press conferences and not be pulling for Conor McGregor.
Yeah, and everything you mentioned earlier about he seems down to earth. He's like a personable guy off the stage and out of the ring and all that. Floyd's not. He's a jackass. That's all you can say.
Yeah, I mean, Floyd didn't break down in tears. I mean, Conor almost broke down in tears talking about his son and how that's the, he's got, shout out to so-and-so McGregor. I'm a daddy, and that's his motivation to continue to push and grind and sign these $100 million fights. And I don't know. I mean, I don't know how you can not pull for Conor, especially in this fight. But let's get to the actual fight real quick, and then we'll switch over to the NBA. Do you think Conor even has a chance? My opinion, and I'll get to it in a second. I want to hear your thoughts first. I've changed my opinion on what I initially thought was going to happen and what I now think is going to happen. How do you think this fight plays out?
Sadly, I think it's going to play out like the rest of Mayweather's fights. He's not going to get touched. He's going to bounce around and just clip him enough to get the points each round, and it's going to be another one of those patty cakes. So I think he still wins. Obviously, his technical boxing skills are not even comparable to Conor's, and I think Conor's going to try to catch him a couple big times, but for the most part, he's going to be covering up to try to protect himself from those quick shots. Obviously, Mayweather's not a big puncher, but he's effective, throws good, concise punches, and gets out of the way of ones coming back at him. So I'm worried, and I fear that I think it's going to be another one of those Mayweather patty cake fights.
If you had to do a percentage, do you give Conor a chance?
Get ready for it. Puncher's chance, yes. I'd say 95% of me thinks it's going to be Floyd, though.
Yeah, I think that's even optimistic compared to what a lot of people think. I've heard a lot of the pros, the boxers, the MMA fighters, the analysts, they're not really giving Conor much of a chance. And up until this week, at least, I was in the same boat. I mean, throughout all the speculation, before we even knew this fight was going to happen, and we just, it was just the super fight that we kept talking about, maybe it would happen. It all came down to, well, is it going to be a UFC fight or is it going to be a boxing match? Because whatever arena it's in, that athlete is going to have the advantage, and it's not even close. I mean, it ends up being a boxing match, and you're going up against one of the best boxers ever, and I don't know if he's even got a chance. But if they were to go into the octagon, I think if they go into the octagon, Conor is even more likely to win in a UFC fight than Floyd is likely to win in a boxing match. Were you able to follow that logic?
Completely agree. Because there's just so many other elements, and God, he would trip him up. He would hit him with a leg kick once, and he would just buckle. There's just no chance. But I just wanted to be clear here. I don't think Floyd's going to knock him out by any chance. It's going to be another one of those where he tags him enough to get the points.
Right.
He's not going to injure him. He might draw blood once or twice because, you take a shot to the head in any capacity, it has a chance of cutting you up. But there's no way he knocks out Conor. It's going to be a very technical fight.
Yeah. And that's where I kind of teeter-totter here. I'm not going to give Conor, I'm not saying it's 50-50 or anything like that, but I'm probably going over 5% on Conor having a chance, because just seeing those guys finally stand toe-to-toe on Tuesday, man, he's got the size advantage. He has definitely got the size advantage on Floyd. And the thing that Conor gets the edge because this is going to be a match that Floyd has never seen in his entire career. All 49 fights, he's never faced a guy like Conor McGregor. And I think it could even work to Conor's advantage to a certain point that he's not a boxer, because he's not going to, there's kind of a cadence. There's like an art form to boxing, the dips and the ducks and all that. Conor doesn't know any of that, and I don't know what his training regiment's like, but I just can envision him just running after Floyd, just chasing him down, trying to get him into a corner like he's having a street brawl or something. And I think if Conor were to land a punch, you never know what could happen. That's the only chance I'm giving him, is that if he's able to land a punch, if he's able to back him into a corner, you never know. However, then I kind of fall back on, well, look, 49 professional boxers, guys that have trained for years at boxing, and you can draw your own conclusions about, oh, Floyd's never fought anybody and all that. Regardless, these are professional boxers, and they weren't fast enough to keep up with Floyd. He was able to, like you said, just kind of run around, hide from him, get a couple of jabs in, get his points, and stay relatively untouched. And that's how he remains 49-0. And that's why I love watching Floyd Mayweather, the boxer, because you know what you're watching. If you're signing up for it, you should know ahead of time what you're getting into. And I just think he's an absolute master at what he does, and he's used it to go 49-0. But I do think that Conor has a chance if he's able to stick with him. I just kind of end up falling back on and kind of contradicting myself in that Floyd, while he's older, he might be a little bit slower. I mean, you look at the record, 49 professional boxers were not fast enough to keep up with Floyd. What's to get us to think that some guy is just going to pick up boxing for a few months and be able to hang with him?
Well, I hope you're right with your percentages you gave, because, again, I'd like to see a fight that is actually worth the $90. That being said, you're not going to buy it, are you?
I will not buy it. I will gladly, hey, we get like 10 guys over at somebody's house, I'll throw down, I'll pitch in on it. If there's a bar, there's a lot of bars and restaurants in San Diego that actually they stream it or they play it for free. You can find places that won't have a crazy coverage charge. They're not going to make you buy $100 worth of food and drinks or anything like that. You can actually find places if you know the right people, if you look, just do a little bit of research, you can find a place to watch the big fights. So I will definitely make sure I'm watching it. I'm not forking over $100 though.
Yeah, no chance.
So we'll see what happens. All I know is that the MMA world, I don't know, the boxing, is this UFC? I don't know, but the promotion, Mayweather Promotions or whatever, they've hooked me. They have absolutely hooked me. I didn't know it was going to be this captivating. I didn't know I was going to be this into it, but this is 100% appointment television. You cannot miss this. Make plans now. Clear August 26th out of your schedule.
Yeah, sadly, the big three had to get rescheduled for this event, but I think we'll be able to survive.
Well, let's transition into some NBA talk before we wrap it up here. I'll let you get going. We're talking with Downtown Tom, longtime friend of the Rinder Report. I mentioned it at the beginning. The incredible offseason continues. It's just the NBA offseason is always one of, if not the most entertaining offseason. The offseason is usually more entertaining than most of the regular season with blockbuster trades, and there's so many. I was talking about the image problem that the MLB has as far as identifiable superstars. The NBA is king at that. I mean, you know what these guys look like. You got the shoe deals, and you know their faces. I mean, they are absolute superstars. And so it's, is there a super team going to be formed? Is LeBron leaving? And all this. We have the same, for the most part, the same narrative every year, but it is so captivating. And this offseason in particular has just been insane. I want to talk about some of the contracts because, for a long time, I've always thought when I think ahead in my life, if I'm lucky enough to ever have a child, if I'm lucky enough to have a son, I thought, you know what? Hopefully he likes sports. Hopefully he wants to play sports. And I'm going to tie his right hand behind his back. He's going to be a left-handed pitcher because he's going to sign some crazy $150 million contract because pitcher contracts in MLB were they were on a path of just absolutely exponential rates. It was crazy when Greinke and Kershaw were getting these contracts. Now, I'm not so sure. Now I might be giving them a basketball because, my God, these NBA contracts have been insane. Started with Steph Curry, and then James Harden comes right back, and he's making like $51 million a year. I mean, what is going on with these contracts?
I mean, obviously, you look at it, the salary cap's around $100 million a year, and you got a team of 12. $50 million of that going to one player is absurd to me, but if you look at the value that player is bringing to your team, I guess it makes sense. but it's also in anticipation of a higher salary cap in years to come. And as we saw this year, the salary cap didn't expand like it did the previous year. So I think some of these owners or some of these GMs are actually digging themselves in a hole, and I think it's kind of ridiculous. But, hey, it ain't tricking if you got it. And all these teams are making hand over fist because the NBA is the most popular game besides the NFL these days. So I think it's just byproduct of the viewership and the momentum that the sport's been growing over the last few years. But good for James Harden, good for Steph Curry. They've obviously been very captivating players and deserved it. But you got guys like Mozgov making $60 million over 4 years. It's just, oh God, I just couldn't imagine a team of mine signing a player of that magnitude, which is none, for that kind of money and being strapped with watching him ride the bench for the next 4 years. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah, well, you mentioned your team, and I want to get to your team in a little bit because they've been making some moves, and I'm excited to talk about them and follow them this year. But these contracts, I mean, my God, I'm seeing some of the names, and you follow like Adrian Wojnarowski on Twitter, and you see all the numbers coming out, and you're just going, my God. I mean, yeah, Steph Curry and James Harden and Paul George, guys like that. I can wrap my head around their contracts at least a little bit, but there are names. I'll drop 3 names right now that I imagine you know, and I know because I looked them up, but a casual sports fan listening right now might not have ever heard of these guys. Otto Porter Jr., over $100 million on his new contract. Tony Snell, who you and I remember going up against him when he was at San Diego State, when he was playing for New Mexico against San Diego State. He averaged like 9 points a game last year, and he just signed a contract for $44 million. Contavious Caldwell Pope, I mean, 1 year, $18 million. And I'm just like, what the hell? I'm looking up their numbers, and I'm like, okay, that's, like 12 points, 3 rebounds, and they're making almost $20 million a year. And just to compare that, and I know it's apples and oranges, and as we just kind of discussed with the NFL, Derek Carr is the highest paid player in the NFL now, just signed a record-breaking deal. He's going to make $25 million a year. Contavious Caldwell Pope is going to make $18 million next year. I mean, it's insane to me.
Yeah, one first thing you got to keep in mind with football to basketball comparisons is, like I mentioned, there's 14 on a team. Oftentimes it's only 13 under contract at one given time, and NFL's got 53-man rosters. So you can't exactly hand out $30 million there per player and everything. Obviously, you understand that. Second of all, there's a big thing with contracts that a lot of people don't understand. You're looking at, remember Tristan Thompson from the Cavs getting that big deal a couple years ago. Well, Tristan Thompson's agent is actually LeBron's agent. So if you want to keep LeBron around, you got to sign people that are under the same agency because he's got that tight partnership with his agent and his business partners. Guess who Contavious Caldwell Pope has as an agent?
I would have to guess that it's probably the same agent as LeBron James and Tristan Thompson.
You are correct, and obviously there's been a lot of speculation on that's where LeBron wants to go, and obviously if you appease clients like that, then the agent of LeBron is going to play it easy on them next year because I think that's next year that he's a free agent, and there could be some underlying factors that go into these kind of contracts, but I couldn't agree more. Contavious Caldwell Pope is probably like the 15th best shooting guard in the NBA, and he's getting paid like a top 5 player. I mean, you didn't mention J.J. Redick, but he got, $23 million for over 1 year? Guy, I mean, he's a great shooter coming off screens, but God forbid he has to do something in isolation. There's just no chance it's happening. I really wanted him on the Timberwolves, but I wanted him on like a $6 million contract. These guys are interesting times it comes in the NBA right now, and I think a lot of it, you see these GMs are straddled with these contracts they can't move when they need to trade it, free up cap space, and it's like, what the hell were you doing signing that guy to $18 million a year in the first place? Like, ask yourself that when you're doing it. Or Tim Hardaway Jr. didn't mention $71 million over 4 years. Are you kidding me? You got to be kidding me.
Well, there's a lot that I didn't name because I just didn't want to waste too much time. I'm just making a point with a couple of names. But, yeah, I mean, you go down the list and you're just like, what is going on? And I know the television contracts have generated a ton of money for these players, and that's great. And maybe the NFL, I'm expecting the NFL to go on strike whenever their CBA is up or whatever it is, because they need to get more guaranteed money. They really do. I fully support fully guaranteed contracts in the NFL, especially. It's just the players are at such a disadvantage in the NFL. But I remember, I think it was 2 years ago that Dellavedova signed like a $45 million contract after they won, because he D's up Steph Curry and he looks okay for like a couple of games, and then all of a sudden he's making $45 million, and it's just, I don't know. It's
I think
crazy.
In his instance, he's not quite that worth it, but he is a pretty good defender, and he still has been. But that was one of those situations where he got a contract offer sheet from a different team, and Cleveland decided, that's a little too steep for our taste. But I couldn't agree more. There's just,
it's like the J.J. Redick analogy that you brought up. J.J. Redick. I mean, it's just teams are overpaying for a specialist. They will pay for somebody that can come in and just shoot a three off the bench, or they'll pay a ton of money for a guy like Dellavedova to lock up some team's point guard. That's pretty much what they're paying for.
Well, and the sad thing is, and that's the balance of power issue in the NBA, is free agents don't want to go to teams that are either A, bad, or B, in a undesirable market. Like, for years as a Minnesota fan, it's been just not happening. Like, you got to sign J.J. Barea at $20 million over a couple of years, and like that is like the key free agent of the offseason most of the time, because guys just don't want to go to these undesirable markets or bad teams. And so a lot of times it's the rich getting richer. You saw with the Warriors picked up a couple of decent players in this offseason for pennies. And like, if they were to have gone to maybe a New Orleans, they're getting paid, $10 to $15 million. David West turned down $30 million to go play for a contender at $2 million a year. So NBA's got to work on their balance of power, figure out ways to make it more competitive, because as we see it now, the East Coast or the Eastern Conference has just turned into like a freshman league, and the West Coast has become, just a ridiculous powerhouse. And it already was, but it's even more elevated now. So they got to figure something out.
Yeah, I mean, at least the only thing I can say about the Western Conference is at least we're starting to get more of a distribution of the talent. I mean, Houston looks like they're going to definitely be able to contend. San Antonio, even if they don't bring in anybody else, just given Kawhi Leonard and Popovich, you're going to throw them into the conversation. It's still, and Oklahoma City now is going to be a contender. So at least the West, they're going to have a little more competition, I think, for the Warriors. I think it's still going to be Golden State, but at least it's being a little more distributed, whereas on the Eastern Conference, there's one team. There's one team on the Eastern Conference. Tom, before I let you go, I know you were in Las Vegas, and I'm captivated by this Summer League. Summer League. The Lonzo Ball's first game in Vegas for the Lakers was on ESPN. Not ESPN2, not ESPN News, not on Watch ESPN, not ESPN The Ocho. It was on the head channel, ESPN at 5:30 or whatever on a Friday night. A sold-out Summer League. I mean, is this the power of Lonzo Ball? Is it only the power of Lonzo Ball, or is it just the NBA, it's elevating to a different level?
Well, first of all, let me backtrack for a second. How dare you list off 3 teams in the Western Conference and not say the great Minnesota Timberwolves will be in there, because they will be. And if you go against what they have going, you got a problem with me, all right?
I don't have any problem with what they're doing. I'm not really a fan of any NBA team. I watch the certain matchups. I'll watch certain players during the regular season. I'm very interested in what Minnesota's doing. I think Thibodeau's a great coach, and then they go and get Butler. I mean, they've already got, KAT. He's going to win, I mean, MVP, maybe not next year, but in his career, he's an MVP caliber player. Defensive player of the year, he's going to be in the running. I mean, they're definitely building a solid team, and they just brought in Jamal Crawford, who I'm a big fan of. I like what they're building over there in Minnesota.
Thank you. Now, back to Summer League. I think the sick truth behind it all is people aren't infatuated with Lonzo Ball. It's his obnoxious father they are. So let me tell you, the game, there was a lot of hype towards it, and obviously I was sitting among a ton of Laker fans, and it's a pretty accessible city to get to, Vegas being, and it's just nonstop Laker talk. You had Magic down on the courtside seat sitting with the new GM, Rob Pelinka, sitting there. Oh, Magic's out there. Oh, here's this. You had some other NBA players around there. But can you imagine who was the star of the show when they made their appearance?
Well, he joined the ESPN broadcast.
Yes, that is LeVar Ball. So the second he emerged from the background, so the team comes out of the tunnel, and maybe 5 minutes later he comes out of the tunnel. The team got a loud roar. His blew theirs away, and the crowd just followed him everywhere, and it was like they were doing the wave around the stadium essentially, because everywhere he walked, it turned into like some tour of Japan with the Rolling Stones back in the 70s. Like, it was just crying people nearly. And I'm just sitting here like, am I really seeing what I'm seeing? Is this really happening? And God, I just can't imagine like where our society is going in 5 years from now. What will be like if LeVar Ball has become our new idol in terms of pop culture, because that guy is just so ridiculously obnoxious. And to see the fanfare that he had by showing up at the stadium, and you see his interviews after the game talking about, I don't want to go into it, but he's just an imbecile. And I already hated the Lakers enough, and just to have this guy added to the team is just going to make them even more deplorable to me, and I just can't wait to root against them for the next 10 years until, obviously, Lonzo blows out a knee or an ankle because he's wearing these third-rate shoes that his dad's forcing him to wear and not making any money off of sponsorship. But, yeah, so I'll just get right back into the Summer League. Obviously, they got a pretty cool venue there. I'm not sure if you've ever been to UNLV, but they got the main stadium, which they play their games in, and their practice stadium is Cox Pavilion, and it's actually connected through like an inter-stadium tunnel. And so when you buy a ticket for a Summer League, it's got a general admission ticket, and you just walk from one stadium to the next, and all of a sudden you walk into a new gym. You're like, oh, there's tons of 7-footers on the floor dunking on each other, and I'm like 10 feet away. So it's a really cool experience. There's all kinds of people from the league and columnists you read on ESPN and TV people and celebrities walking around. So it's a great event, and it's almost unfortunate that it's grown so much hype, because now it's the ticket prices, like I'd mentioned to you previously, went from $30 to $200 on the second day of the Summer League tournament. So it's pretty great, and the NBA's done a good job of capitalizing on the hype that they've been building lately, it seems.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think this is the NBA kind of embracing all the momentum that they're getting from these super contracts and all the drama that's going on in the offseason. They're riding off. Really, I thought the postseason was fantastic. I know a lot of people thought it was boring, but there's a silent majority, because the ratings were up, not just in the finals, but throughout the entire postseason. The ratings were up. So I thought they were great, and compared to the regular season, which, again, maybe I'm the outlier, but everybody said the regular season was so boring. But my God, the MVP race this year was one of the best I've ever seen. And we saw a guy like Russell Westbrook do something that hasn't been done in like 50 years in averaging a triple-double. I thought the NBA was great this season, and they're definitely riding that momentum. And it looks like they're riding it right into the Summer League and taking advantage of it. And we'll have a couple months off, and then regular season comes around. But you bring up LeVar Ball.
It's really turned into a mini version of the NFL. And in the first day of free agency, they had the Jump, one of the ESPN NBA shows, was on at midnight, right when it turned East Coast time, and they were doing recaps of all that. That's never happened before. So the NBA is all of a sudden on the same stage as the NFL in some regards. And I couldn't agree with you more that there were just little things going on throughout the regular season that kept me engaged the entire time. And I think a big part of that is access to the players and social media, and always getting to hear the little things going on between each team and the different smack talking that's going on each night. So they're really finding the best way to get all the information out to the fans, and the fans are just eating it up, can't get enough of it.
Yeah, I mean, the NFL drives the ship in sports. We all know that, but the NBA, they've got it right, because their calendar matches up, because not a lot of people care about the regular season. So the NFL, they own from August through February, and that's the beginning and middle of the NBA season that not a lot of people care about. And then in March, we've got March Madness, so college basketball, and then in April, regular season in the NBA winding down. Everyone's still focused on the NFL draft and the combine and everything like that. And then after the NFL draft, the playoffs are just getting started for the NBA, and they've got 2 full months of playoff basketball that leads right into the off-season acquisitions and free agency beginning at midnight, 12:01 with Rachel Nichols and Tracy McGrady on television, like you said. So the NFL or the NBA, I mean, they're taking advantage of the time that they have because they're competing with mid-season baseball that nobody cares about.
Yeah, and one more step towards the NBA today. They announced that they're taking away 2 timeouts in the last 3 minutes of the game, and that seems like one of the points where we could have done away with how long the endings of NBA games are. So
Sure.
Even there, they see that they're trying to cater to our ADD society that we have grown into.
Sure. We'll wrap it up here. Got to talk about him because, you went on your soapbox and you didn't let me jump on. LeVar Ball. First of all, I got a theory, okay? You ready for this?
Hit me.
In 12 years, LeVar Ball will be president of the United States.
I mean, do I have to even respond to that?
I think you just did. I'm obviously being a little facetious there, but given the way things have turned out, I would say anything's possible. And so
he's fitting the bill of the kind of idiots we're putting in charge. But I'm hoping we learn from our mistake after our current situation we're in right now. But
I'm just saying I wouldn't be. First of all, nothing will surprise me anymore as long as I live. And then in 12 years, if we have a Ball Kardashian ticket, I can't say I'd be too surprised. But as far as
Kardashians, I could believe that. But LeVar Ball is still kind of niche to the sports world and ESPN. He's been drummed up by the ESPN TMZ hype, and he's not quite there. God forbid that happens. So.
Sure. But see, I actually have a different opinion of LeVar Ball. And I've said this before, and I have no problem backing it up. I think the guy's a genius. I understand I totally get the people you get sick of it. And I got sick of it too when I saw him on ESPN, him and Stephen A. Smith going at it every single week. They'd have him on. Guys like Colin Cowherd would just sign, have him come in, him and Lonzo, but it's just him. They bring him in once a week because they know it's going to drive up ratings. And I wasn't really I didn't try to fall into the trap there a little bit. But just LeVar Ball in general, first of all, I think he's a genius because everything he said would happen, happened. From what I've heard, and I've talked to LeVar Ball personally, I mean, it's I'm not going to necessarily call it a Conor McGregor thing where he's different off camera than he is on camera, but he's a good dad. He hasn't raised a bunch, no troublemakers. The kids haven't been arrested. Kids aren't out doing a bunch of stupid stuff. There's a little bit that's gone public. I guess his wife she's very sick and he's been dealing with a lot of things at home. So for him to do all of this, he's definitely, he's on a different level than just a dad that cares for his son. But I think at the end of the day, he just cares for his son. And all 3 of his sons, and he wants the best for them, and he's putting them in positions to succeed. I mean, he's getting them all, they're all getting scholarships to USC. A couple of them are going to be in the NBA. And like I said, they're not troublemakers. They're not out there cursing on TV and anything like that. I get that he's a little flamboyant, a little outlandish, but at the end of the day, I think his intentions are good, and I think it's all part of a plan. I think he's a genius because he goes out and says these insane, idiotic things like he could beat Michael Jordan in one-on-one. Nobody believes that, including LeVar Ball. But if he goes out there and says that, then Lonzo does a Foot Locker commercial where he embraces that and makes fun of his dad, and his dad becomes the GOAT of that joke, and everyone goes, wow, Lonzo's great. Lonzo's so different from his dad, and everybody loves Lonzo now. I think that was all part of a plan. I think it's working out very well for LeVar Ball. And my last point on my rant here is that there have been several people have said, I can't remember, I think it was maybe Lee Jenkins from Sports Illustrated. I heard him talking about it on the radio. But he was saying, go ask Steve Altman. Steve Alford. Steve Altman. He works for San Diego State. Steve Alford. Go ask Steve Alford. Once Lonzo got to UCLA, you never heard from LeVar. He wasn't in the coach's office. He wasn't calling the coach every week on the phone like, hey, you got to be doing this with Lonzo. He let him coach his son. He let him do his thing. And that's what I think a lot of people maybe they didn't know that, or maybe they just assume, oh, there's no way. Look, if LeVar Ball is on the Lakers broadcast team this year and doing his thing every week, it's going to get old. It's going to be annoying, and I will eat some crow and totally be anti that. I don't think it's going to happen. I think LeVar Ball is going to slowly kind of back off, and he's going to let his son do the talking. I'm kind of a fan of the guy.
Enough. Oh, God. Well, first of all, let me treat it like Tony Reale around the horn. First of all, he has sons got offers from UCLA, not USC. Let's please not get that one mixed up. Obviously, I'm a USC fan nowadays, so I can't be associating with that guy. Second of all, you talked to him before?
I did. As a radio producer, I have booked him on a radio show, and I got to talk to him a little bit off air. And he was a really nice guy. I sensed a difference in how I was talking to him off air and how he presented himself on air. It's like he flipped a switch, kind of like Conor McGregor, and I got a sense of that.
All right. I'll take your word for it, man.
I got his number. Maybe I'm just gonna have to get him on the Rhino Report. That's what it is.
That sounds great. Let's at least let me listen a fly on the wall in that situation. That'd be great.
Yeah.
So I know we're supposed to wrap it, but I have one question. Are you going to follow the Chargers this year?
That is an interesting question, and I stayed away from the NFL because, well, it's middle of July. We still got plenty of time to get into the NFL. I will be hate watching the Chargers. I think I'm comfortable in saying that. And look, a lot of people might know by now, my history with sports. I grew up in Seattle. I grew up a Seahawks fan. Over the last 3-4 years, I've fallen off of the Seattle bandwagon. You know, when you live in a city for long enough, I've been in San Diego for 8 years. I've adopted the city as my own. I work in sports media in San Diego. It served me no purpose to know what the Seahawks were doing. I became a Chargers fan. I've become a Padres fan, and I was all in on this Chargers team. And then we know what happens. They up and leave. But I'm definitely going to be watching at least this year and probably next year. As much as people say they won't be watching, I think they will. I think the ratings from San Diego, when we see the San Diego market's ratings, I think they will be pro-Chargers because guys like Phillip Rivers and Antonio Gates. You're damn right I'm tuning in on Monday Night Football because I want to see Gates break that record. I want Rivers to hit Gates opening drive for a touchdown. And I won't be happy if the Chargers win, but I will be happy every time I see a guy like Phillip Rivers throwing a touchdown. You can't help but feel for the guy. The players didn't choose this. Their scumbag of an owner did. I have no ill will towards the players, but I do think that really there's not a lot of old veterans on that Chargers team. Not a lot of guys with a long history in San Diego. So as Rivers kind of falls off and as Gates falls off, the Chargers, I think, are actually going to be in pretty good shape with guys like Melvin Gordon and Joey Bosa. But
yeah, that's what I was going to say, is they're actually looking like they're going to have one of their better years in a long time, and they have the most hope and promise they've had in quite a while, too. So I think I got to imagine that's stinging even more than just the fact that they're gone, but they actually are going to be pretty entertaining for once because they've been pretty boring for the last 5 years, it seems like. Actually, I moved in 2008 down there, and that was the last year that they made it. Never since I moved there, they were terrible. So I guess I'm somewhat to blame, but it's been a boring product they put out there, and the fans were still hoping every year they're going to get better, but it never happened. So
yeah,
that's too bad for you guys down there.
I'll go in depth on it at a later podcast, but
of course,
I do think that, first of all, I think San Diego just deserves the Chargers to go 2-14 next year. I mean, that's what San Diego needs. After that, I mean, the worst case scenario, this is a talking point now in San Diego, is what would happen if the Chargers were to make the playoffs or, God forbid, win the Super Bowl next year. That would be the absolute worst nightmare for a San Diegan as they go and win this next year. Now, they don't have a choice. If they want to be accepted in Los Angeles, they have to win. I think that they have the potential to go 10-6, I think, is their ceiling next year. They went 5-11, I think it was last year, and they were battered with injuries. I mean, it was like week after week. Keenan Allen was the biggest injury to their team, but I mean, they had every week guys going out with season-long, ACL
their
injuries and stuff.
Line, I mean,
they were dropping like flies. So if everybody stays healthy, they have a chance. But I do think relocation in general is going to weigh down on them. I don't think they're going to stay healthy because, well, they have no history of staying healthy. Why should we believe all of a sudden they're magically, is the air up in Carson a little bit different? I don't think so. I don't see it happening. But if everything in a perfect world, I could see them going 10-6. But another factor is last year they lost like 5 games by a combined like 19 points. A lot of games that could have gone either way. So if those turn into wins all of a sudden, you're looking at a team that's contending for the playoffs. I hope it doesn't happen. That
would make San Diego the most cursed city, I feel like. That would take over for Cleveland before it was. I mean, obviously they haven't had a championship in quite a long time, but that would make them definitely.
Yeah, well, I mean, as far as championship droughts go, San Diego now is the longest, with Chicago winning the World Series and the Cavs winning the NBA title. San Diego is now the longest championship drought in sports. Yeah. It's sad.
Last quick NFL plug. Have you seen the Amazon Network Hard Knocks knockoff that they do?
The one about the Rams?
Yeah.
Have not watched it, heard a lot about it. Have you seen it?
It's a must. I just binge-watched it this past week, and it's like Hard Knocks, but the entire season instead of just the pre.
Yeah, I saw the clip. Camp. I saw the clip of Jeff Fisher breaking down and telling his staff that he had just been fired, and
it's incredible. You got to watch
crazy. That was nuts.
Yeah, they do a bang-up job, so go do it. Maybe wait until right before football starts to get yourself really back into it. And it's not really a time-sensitive thing where you don't have to be watching it during the season. It's phenomenal. I really highly suggest it.
Downtown Tom, ladies and gentlemen. Tom, you got anything that you need to get off your chest here before I let you go?
2 hats were on a rack. One looked at the other and said, "Stay here. I'll go on ahead."
Didn't. Tom, really appreciate it, bud.
As always, love to do it. Talk to you soon, hopefully.
All right, Downtown Tom, always bringing the entertainment. That's going to do it here. Went a little longer than we normally do, went a little longer than we like to go, but you know what? Like I said at the beginning of this podcast, there was a lot going on in sports between this Mayweather-McGregor nonsense and the insanity of the NBA offseason, and especially when we had taken a couple of weeks off from sports. It was good to get back into it. I hope you took something away from this. But that's going to do it for episode 46 of the Reindl Report. You can follow me on Twitter at Paul Reindl SD. All these podcasts, everything goes up on the website, www.thereindlreport.com. You can get it all right there. And you can get it on iTunes as well. If you go on iTunes, you can subscribe. Just go right on your phone, hit the podcast app, type in the Reindl Report in the search box, and hit subscribe. And then how it works is I press upload, and just a couple of minutes later, you will have the podcast right there on your phone. You get a little notification, even if you want. It says new episode of the Reindl Report available. So that's going to do it. Hoping to get back into the swing of things here, doing a weekly podcast. Love to get back into that. So a lot coming up with the NFL. We'll follow this Mayweather-McGregor stuff as long as we need to. I think it's going to quiet down just a little bit until we get into the fight week, but you never know with these two guys. So until